This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. Number 24 on my list of most valuable Cleveland Browns coming into this season is Donta Foreman. I'm going to get it right, the pronunciation. I know I've been mispronouncing it. I thought he was just Donta. It's Donta Foreman. Thank you guys for that correction, those who offered it. Donta Foreman, to me, is somebody who's going to be a significant role player for the Cleveland Browns. I think he's going to fill and service that backup running back role kind of in a similar way to what Kareem Hunt did for this team. If I'm looking at how the carries are likely to be divvied out, right, I think the Browns are going to probably give you 525 rushing attempts, somewhere along that line. As much as people like to get mad at Kevin for not running the ball or running the ball too much, he tends to be pretty balanced. He tends to want to run the ball about 500 times. He tends to want to throw the ball about 500 times. Even if Nick Chubb's not in there, he really values staying balanced. And I don't think that's going to change with Ken Dorsey. Kevin Stefanski's still going to have an effect on the offense. I think they're going to do a pretty good job of staying balanced this year like they have throughout Kevin's whole run. So I think there's going to be about 525 carries to get for running backs. I think Nick Chubb is going to get about 250 of them. I am of the belief, if you look at his incentives, and I'll talk about this more once we get to Nick Chubb, but if you look at Nick Chubb's incentives, if you look at how Nick Chubb structured it, it is very obvious to me that his camp believes he will be back by week 1 and that he is not going on the PUP list. If you look at his timeline history from when he's had ACL tears before, he seems to be a fast recoverer. He also has come back from an injury much worse than this, from a much quicker time frame. He was younger, but all signs point to we'll probably see Nick Chubb start to practice on some level in like late August, which means he'll probably play at the early portion of the season. So I think Nick Chubb's going to be good for about 250 carries. I think Deshaun Watson's going to run the ball about 80 times. I know some people don't want him to do design runs anymore, but that's still part of his game. He's not going to run the ball as much as he did in Houston, right? He used to be good for 100 carries in Houston. 80 carries is a bit reduced. It's kind of what you want from him. You still need him to be a factor in the run game. He's still very valuable there, and does provide a lot of value. You want him to run for first downs. And just because he runs the ball 80 times doesn't mean he gets hit 80 times is an important thing to keep in mind, right? Most of these runs should be run to the sideline, get out of bounds, get the first down, don't get touched, right? That's what the bulk of those carries should be. So 80 attempts there for Deshaun. And I think that leaves around 120 to 150 carries, depending on how much time Nick Chubb misses at the beginning of the season for somebody like Donta Foreman. And I think that's going to be a nice little role for him to carve himself out of. If you look at his 2022 season, which I do find to be the cleanest sample that you can find in his career, he had 203 rushing attempts, 914 yards. And the reason, again, I want to stick with the 2022 numbers is that's when he was getting the most concentrated amount of carries consistently without being in and out of the field, right? Last year with Chicago, he got injured, came back, got injured again. His sample was kind of shaky. So that's why I want to use the 2022 sample. I just find it as a more consistent sample as these games kind of happen back to back against each other. He was healthy for the whole year. He had a better offensive line, more comparable to what he would have in Cleveland, and a more similar run scheme. Is why I gravitate to the sample of 2022. Another thing to keep in mind with those numbers, right? 203 rushing attempts, 914 yards. He played in 17 games that year, but most of his carries happened after week 6. I believe he only had like 7 carries in the first 5 weeks of the season. So if you look at those numbers as 12 weeks of work instead of 17 weeks of work, they become much, much, much more impressive because it's more reflective of what he was able to do. When you look at some of his numbers in that year, he outpaced his rushing attempts in yards. So he was ranked 23rd in rushing attempts in the NFL, 23rd most rushing attempts. He had the 19th most yards, which means that he's being efficient with those yards. He was ranked 25th in yards per carry. And again, 25th might not sound like a world beater if we're talking about a Nick Chubb replacement, but we're talking about a Nick Chubb complement. And if you can have Nick Chubb, who we know is probably going to be in the top 5 of yards per carry, if not number 1 in the league, because he's been a 5-yard per carry guy pretty much his whole career. If he can stay up at that or at 4.8, if he has a slight drop, you're going to have somebody in the top 5, and then your second running back is going to be 25th, which is really damn good. So you're talking about having 2 of the best 32 running backs in the NFL from per yards per carry in your backfield. It's really, really good. It means you have 2 quality starters back there. If you look at his yards per game and you make it from week 7 on, he averaged about 74.6 yards per game, which would have been good for 6 in the NFL that year. His PFF grades hold up for both years. He's around a 75 for each year. So if that's something you value, that evaluation of him, it reflects what the numbers are saying, which is he's a starting level running back in the NFL. This is who D'Onta Foreman has been so far in his NFL career. And I think that's why he's going to be super useful for the Cleveland Browns in this kind of 1-2-3 punch that they're developing, where they're going to have Nick Chubb, they're going to have D'Onta Foreman, and then they're also going to sprinkle in a little bit of Jerome Ford to be a change of pace / third down back. I think that's going to be a very effective combination for him. If you look at him as far as being a replacement in the role that Kareem Hunt used to hold, he's had better numbers recently than Kareem Hunt has. He had less carries than Kareem Hunt last year, but outrushed him when it comes to yards. And yeah, Kareem Hunt had more rushing touchdowns, but most of those rushing touchdowns, I believe 8 of those rushing touchdowns were in short yardage situations. And then you look at the yards per carry. While both aren't carrying a great number during that season, keep in mind that he was behind a much worse situation in Chicago than Kareem Hunt was in Cleveland for most of the year. The 3-point low yards per carry that Kareem Hunt had to the close to 4 that D'Onta Foreman had are obviously much more preferable if you're the Cleveland Browns. So he's going to fill that role that Kareem Hunt has. He's put up better numbers than Kareem Hunt the last couple of years, just per average. And I think he's going to be able to fill that role similarly to Kareem Hunt. He's still a physical runner like Kareem Hunt. He's still a heavy running back like Kareem Hunt. So you still get to wear down defenses the same way you do with Kareem Hunt. It's just now you get somebody who is like running Kareem Hunt from like 2022, right? Like it's not like you're getting 2021 Kareem Hunt out there, but 2022 Kareem Hunt, very good player. Not necessarily as aged down as like the 2023 version of him. So I think that'll be fine. You know, D'Onta Foreman is one of the more slept on free agent signings. There's another guy that I think is pretty slept on that I can't wait to cover in Jordan Hicks as well. But yeah, I think the D'Onta Foreman signing, it's going to end up being a good one. He'll be kind of part of that 1-2 punch. It'd be interesting to see how much they try to fit Jerome Ford in there, because like if you just look at Jerome Ford's numbers on paper, he was an 800-yard back. He had over 1,000 total yards, but he was so inconsistent down to down that I find it hard for the Browns to put him in a situation where they're going to rely on him. Like that's the big thing with Jerome Ford. Like, do you want to rely on Jerome Ford? My big take with Jerome Ford is that he's a lot like Karis LeVert. And I think I talked about this in the honorable mention video, but I'll regurgitate this for I'll reiterate this for people who want to hear it again. And the reason I say he's like Karis LeVert is Jerome Ford is likely going to be somebody that you just see, what's he on, right? If your run game's getting a little stagnant, Nick Chubb's not running well, D'Onta Foreman's not running well, let's see what Jerome Ford has. And if Jerome Ford's cooking, he'll get like 15 carries in one game. But if Jerome Ford's not, you leave him at 2 and you move on with the other things, right? That's kind of how I think they're going to use Jerome Ford pretty sporadically. There's going to be some games where Jerome Ford gets a ton of carries. There'll be some games where they just shut off the valve because Jerome Ford ain't cooking for whatever reason. But I think that's how they'll use him. And then Deontay Foreman will be a part of that. And then obviously Nick Chubb is Nick Chubb as long as he's healthy. So that's why I have Deontay Foreman at 24 versus having Jerome Ford at 24, because I think Deontay is more equipped to be that backup running back. And I think he's going to probably give you somewhere close to about 600 yards rushing. And if he stays at that and he gets you about 30 first downs on the ground, or more than 30 first downs on the ground, and he stays above a 4.2 yards per carry number, we'll be at a very good place with the Cleveland Browns. As long as his carries are like under 150, I'll be really good with what he's doing out there. So that's my review on Deontay Foreman, why I think he's going to be the 24th most valuable player to the Cleveland Browns. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.